he was doing a ride-along to kind of see what it is that we do. And I'm taking him out into the yard, and I'm showing him what each officer is doing now that the actual execution phase is over. We have the log officer and the tracking officer and all the officers doing different jobs. And him and I are talking, and I hear this screaming, yelling, this woman's voice. And I look up the street, and I see this lady coming at us down the middle of the road. And she is just screaming at the top of her lungs. And yeah, I'm kind of a visual person. And if you've ever seen one of those comets move through space, how it collects debris in its wake, that's kind of how this lady was. She was collecting people. As she moved down the middle of the road, people were coming out of their yards and falling in behind her. And she's making her way towards us. And the young officer that's with me, I see him looking down the road, and his jaws open, you know. And he looks at me and he goes, "Sarge, you want me to handle that?" And I said, "Let me try, but come with me, I might need some help." So I go with him, he goes with me, I walk out and I meet this lady at the perimeter of the yard. And I stop and I said, "Good evening, miss, my name's Sergeant Hughes, Kansas City Police, how can I help you?" And she just goes, "You," and blankety blank, and she starts screaming and cussing at me. And she's dressing me down. I mean, she is going to town. I'm kind of an amateur when I swear. Like if I hit my, thumb with a hammer, I'll let a swear word out or something. This lady was a professional. She was conjugating verbs. And I'm just listening. I step back and I listen to her, and finally she stops to take a breath. And I said, "Ma'am, let me see if I understand you correctly. You work 2 jobs, you bust your butt every day. You can't afford to fix your car, it's broken down in the driveway, which means you have to take the bus to and from your jobs. If it's cold outside, you're sitting in the cold. If it's hot outside, you're sitting in the heat." I said, "You worked hard all day long today, and you're thinking, I'm going to come home and just get off my feet and relax for a little while. But instead, you find that the SWAT team is kicked in your house, your son is under arrest, and your business is out here in the yard for all your neighbors to see." I said, "And it really pisses you off?" And she goes, "Yes, it really pisses me off, yes." So I asked her a couple more questions. I let her talk for a while, and she comes way down. And all of the people that were with her just leave. And so when I feel like that she feels understood, I say, "Ma'am, listen, here's what's going on here today. And here's what we're doing with the search warrant. Now, before I leave, you're going to get a copy of the search warrant. You're going to get a receipt for anything we take. And we will let you know exactly where your son's going and what's going to happen with him. I can't let you back on the property while we're searching, but it is kind of chilly out here. I'll be glad to go get you an extra coat or a jacket from inside so that you can wait comfortably across the street." I said, "How would that be?" She goes, "I'd really like that." So I go in and get the coat, bring it back out to her. And she waits peacefully across the street. And, the young officer that's there watching this, he asked me, he goes, "Sarge," he goes, "Well, why don't you just take her to jail?" And I said, "Listen, we could always just take her to jail. That's always an option." I said, "But try to put yourself in her position." I said, "If you come home from work and all those things that I said to her were true, that you've been working all day, you're tired, I said, remember, she's got justifications in her mind that makes her son dealing drugs and all this other stuff going on okay. She knows these things are happening, but she's justified it in her mind. It makes it okay. She's not part of it. She's working hard." I go, "But imagine her coming home. If you came home and you see this happening, what would your initial reaction be?" I mean, it wouldn't be, "Oh, I had this coming." It would be like, "Man, this is an intrusion, and I'm embarrassed, and I'm hurt." I go, by acknowledging that to her, by showing that I understood that, by recognizing her humanity, then she was much more able to be influenced by the content of what I had to say. And when we talked about it for a while, I said, "Listen, I could have taken her to jail, no doubt about it." I go, "We'd probably had to fight her. Then we had to fight a couple other people. And that would have been what we left the neighborhood with, was the image of us taking this middle-class neighborhood matriarch, this middle-aged neighborhood matriarch, to jail over a disorderly conduct charge, which she was going to bond out on." So again, that's just an example there for me of being able to see the humanity of someone, being able to put myself in her position, stuff that I had not been able to do before. Before it was, again, she's loud, she's challenged, and she needs to go to jail. And we need to make an example of her in front of everybody. Well, the irony is we made an example out of her, but in a totally different regard. You know, and we actually, to an extent, recruited a supporter of what we do. And the reason I know she's a supporter is because these things tend to cascade out. Probably wasn't 20 minutes later, I heard another woman come screaming down the middle of the road. And the officer looks over at me and looks at her and he goes, "You want me to handle this one?" I said, "Wait a second." And as she gets closer, it's the daughter that lived there. And before we could say anything, the mom says, "Hey, they're just doing their job." Classic example of how it cascades out.
All right. What did you see? Thank you, Sarah.
I see him avoiding a power struggle that didn't need to happen.
Didn't need to happen, did it? Gosh, how many things don't need to happen that we can't help ourselves, right?
And he really dug deep into her triangle as to why she was so upset and let her talk, and he listened.
We're so non-concerned with each other that when somebody actually begins to identify a person's outside triangles and really makes the effort, it's almost jarring. It's like, wow, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. So he really made that effort. Did you see the outside inside out in action there? How quickly and seamlessly you kind of worked through all those things? Let's talk about what could have happened at various different points along the way. How could that have gone another direction?
Could have turned into a riot if she got everybody in the neighborhood ready to go.
Yeah. Could have, right? Because again, I like how he said, and he was talking to the younger officer there, he says, you've got to understand her mind. All these things that you see as wrong and bad, she's found a way to justify it. We all do this. She's found a way to justify it to where that's a rational thing for her to act that way. And it's not fair, and it doesn't make sense why they're there causing all this trouble and problem. And so acknowledging the fact that we're all carrying around these boxes and we all have these different justifications is a great way to begin to start detoxifying and de-escalating something, right? All right, so it could have been a riot, could have been something
just
crazy.
left with like the good ripples instead of the bad ripples. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, if they would have taken her to jail, then it would have been them looking bad upon by that neighborhood. Now they looked good by being there to support them, but they need to do their job.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an entirely different tone. So what could have created, again, this accumulation of allies and this deeply entrenched collusion on an ongoing basis between the neighborhood and the police officers.
Or a lot more
really happened.
paperwork.
Yeah, at a minimum, just a lot more time and effort and lawsuits or whatever else, right?
But the mother did become an ally,
Yeah.
headed off the daughter.
Isn't that funny, kind of at the end, to see, again, back to your point, the positive ripple effect of some of these things. It's not just about avoiding bad stuff. Do you remember back when we talked about it's about making things happen, about things go right? So it's not always just about keeping bad things from happening, de-escalating, but if you do it right, it actually reverses, it goes the opposite direction. You can actually make good things happen. In a strange way, in that neighborhood, you could almost make an argument that the neighborhood has a better image of the police officers, despite the fact that they've had to do something that has a negative impact within the neighborhood. That's just interesting to think about, right? What else? Anything else?
I like the teachable moment that he had with this new officer, that he was able to, I mean, and he got to see it in action and actually work,
Yeah.
you know, firsthand. They got to teach him how, so he will do that, you know, maybe next time pick up something like that.
That's hopeful, isn't it? You know, Arbinger has a public safety department. They work with a lot of these police departments, the SWAT teams and organizations, law enforcement agencies throughout the country. And it's fun to see some of that transformation that's going on. I mean, we certainly need it. And with how polarizing things have become to some extent, there's room for some outside, inside out. There's room for seeing people as people. And again, at no point in that process did Chip say, it's really not that bad what your son did, or, you know, maybe we can look the other way. Right? Never. You just simply went about it with an outward mindset. Right? Anything else?
Someone who truly implemented all the skills that he obtained.
Yeah.
You know, we saw at the beginning.
Yeah, I've never met Chip. I'd love to one of these days just sit down and say, give me a timeline on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because I've heard the way that he's described, that's really what he was like. And so that transformation, that does not happen overnight. But also, you can probably relate, there are times where there can be some immediate dramatic transformation within each of us based on things that happen. So who knows? Maybe some of that happened pretty quickly, right? Okay. I think it's powerful to see, again, as we think about the chairs turning. You see these two chairs. You see an invitation coming from that mother, that matriarch. You see her kind of coming up, backing into Chip in a backward chair and inviting him to do the same. Chip, by now becoming more and more sensitive to when he's going into the box. Obviously, he had to make a choice. You can start seeing all these frameworks come into play, right? She came and treated him that way. Chip knows he's right. He knows what he's doing is right. She's completely wrong and off base. I'm not going to tolerate this. I've got a job to do. It could have been so easy and justifiable for him to go into that box, right? And at that point, that justification, it was already kind of already there, but he could have just further amplified all the problems with her and all his own virtue and the goodness that he was doing. One would into any number of these boxes. I deserve better than, and then to begin to distort that entire reality. But he didn't accept that invitation. Because he didn't accept that invitation, at that moment of choice, he kept himself in a position where those chairs knocked back into each other. And that conflict never escalated. Collusion never began. Because it takes two, right?